We would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet to share these conversations on the Vegan Compass podcast.
We extend our respect to elders past and present, as well as any of our listeners and guests. Hello and welcome to the Vegan Compass podcast, unveiling truths, inspiring change. We are your hosts, Rick Allport and Mackenzie Cross.
From wherever you're listening, please be sure to like and subscribe to support this podcast. Now to the episode.
Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Vegan Compass podcast. If you're enjoying it so far, we would really appreciate if you could leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And make sure you subscribe as well on all of those options and YouTube too, so that you get notified when we release a new episode.
Yes, and hi everybody. And of course, to my left is Mackenzie Cross and I'm Rick Allport. And we are very happy to have Mr. Bailey Mason with us today. So Bailey, 2 questions for you. Who are you and what do you do?
I run the animal rights page Warrior for Animals, and on this page I gather support for the animal rights cause for a range of different issues. I also do thought-provoking protests and I post those up as well, but I also share the ugly truth about what's happening to animals too, so some of that confronting imagery, for that to be shared around for people to know really what's actually happening to animals here in Australia. But I've also ran for the Animal Justice Party in the Manly electorate too. So I'm wherever I need to be for the animals and do whatever I can for them to really show people what's happening to them and to give them a voice.
That sounds great. And I'm really interested about how you went with AJP, because both Mackenzie and I at different times did run for AJP up in Queensland. So how did you go in Manly? An interesting seat to be running in.
Yeah, so I ran for the seat of Manly, and that is just such an important seat at that time because the Environment Minister, James Griffin, that was his seat. So during the Meet the Candidates, I was there on stage right next to the Environment Minister. And so I was able to really call him out on stage for the really cruel and animal cruelty issues and environmental destruction issues that happen in New South Wales. So I called him out over the cruelty to kangaroos. He said that, yes, these images are very confronting, but this is all humane. And I called him out on that on stage. And I said, no, this is not humane to do this to these poor baby joeys. And, the audience was horrified as I was describing such cruel practices in the kangaroo killing industry. I also called him out as well at another Meet the Candidates forum. And just for people to know what a Meet the Candidates forum is, it's where those who are running in that electorate get to talk about their issues and get to have questions asked of them by the community. So it's such an important opportunity for an animal advocate like myself or anybody else who's running for the Animal Justice Party to give animals a voice to people who wouldn't usually be thinking about animals and who might be thinking some other different topics are going to come up. So it's such an important way to bring awareness for the animals. So I called him out on the shark net issue, which is a huge issue in Manly. Dolphins and whales and turtles are being caught in these shark nets and they're dying painful and slow deaths. And I called him out on this because sadly, all the candidates on that stage have criticised the shark nets, except for the Environment Minister on stage. And I pointed out that real hypocrisy there to be the Environment Minister of New South Wales and to be supporting and staying silent on such cruelty that's happening. And yeah, the feedback that I got after those Meet the Candidates was really good. People were coming up to me saying they had no idea about these type of cruelty issues. Some people even said they wanted to stop eating meat. And I was pretty shocked by that, people to come up to me, because my objective there in that Meet the Candidates isn't to get people to become vegetarian or vegan necessarily. It's to get people to support the Animal Justice Party and to just know a bit more about these issues. But for people to feel so passionately that they want to actually change their their lifestyles and want to stop eating animals was really cool to see. It was also, being the Manly candidate too, it's the former New South Wales Premier's electorate, Mike Baird, and as many of you know, he tried to shut down greyhound racing in New South Wales. So I also saw Mike Baird there when I was running for the election, and I told him again about, look, the greyhounds are still suffering. We still need to get this cruelty shut down. I was there in my AJP shirt, and the news was there as well. So there's a lot of awareness that happens when you're running for this, regardless if you get in or not. The awareness is huge. There was also the former Environment Minister, Matt Keane, was there as well. So I was able to talk with him about these type of issues too. So it was overall really, really positive. I couldn't believe just the connections that I'm able to make with all these different people. I also got to discuss with the independents. As we all know, the independents is a really growing movement too. And I was able to learn about the independent for Manly, Jolene Hackman, and what her stances are on the environment and on animal welfare. And I learnt that she actually eats vegan multiple times a week with her family. She runs the War on Waste Australia Facebook group, and she discusses the link between animal agriculture and climate change. And so with that information and with the discussions that I've had with her, with shark nets and so on, I decided to preference her number 2 on my how to vote card, which is quite interesting because some people might think, oh, the Animal Justice Party, surely they're going to preference the Greens. Well, in this case, no, because she has a stronger stance on the environment and she acknowledges the link between animal agriculture and climate change. And the Greens lady, she questioned me, well, why did you preference her? And I explained to it, you're not acknowledging the link between animal agriculture and climate change. So this is why I'm going to preference this. So I'm excited for the independents too. And I've been discussing, even past the election, discussing with those independents what their stances are is really important.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that, Bailey. You do so much for the animals. Thank you for sharing that one aspect. And we're going to dive into another very specific aspect of your activism in a moment. But for now, can you kind of take us back to the start? How old were you when you first got into animal rights activism? And what inspired you to get active for the animals?
Look, since I've been very, very little, I've just been naturally empathetic towards animals. So if I've ever seen animal cruelty, like in person, I've always stood against that, tried to save animals whenever I can. I'll give an example. Being very, very little, just a little boy, seeing fish at a yum cha restaurant living in green water, looking like they're suffering, got, their eyes are cloudy, all this type of cruelty, even reporting that at a young age. And even when I've gone to, certain zoos and things like that, I've looked at things and I've got my, there was no iPhones then, just, your camera, just even just a little recording like that. Was it really used or anything? Not really, but I was always thinking about things in the back of my head that this just doesn't feel right. And then when videos popped up when I was 12 years old about what's happening in Australia with the pigs, I watched a video. It was called like Most Humane Slaughter of Pigs, RSPCA approved, all of that type of stuff. I watched that video and I was really confronted. I was like, wow, this is the best of the best. This is RSPCA approved. This is what the organic standards are as well, and the standards across the board. And I watched that footage of those pigs in the gas chambers and I stopped eating animals immediately at around 12 years old. And so that obviously got me involved in terms of like a movement. I was already empathetic as an individual, like with animals, but then, learning about the widespread industry issues made me realize that I've got to make changes in my own life as well as kind of join this group of people to try and make a difference. And with that video that I stumbled across to, it was posted by Animals Australia, and they also had other videos, about the dairy industry and the egg industry. And so I was like, okay, I'm not eating meat, and I'm going to, swap for dairy-free alternatives. And so I was doing all these things, but I didn't realize I was actually a vegan. I was living, I was vegan, but I didn't realize there was a word for what I was doing, because on Animals Australia, they talk about what's happening for, with meat, and then they talk about what's happening with dairy, but you're becoming a vegan without even realizing that there's a word for it, which I guess is probably quite unique for some people. People becoming vegan now, like, really know what it all is. I was just somebody who wasn't supporting animal cruelty, and I just thought I was a vegetarian, not eating eggs and dairy, basically.
What a crazy time. I mean, yeah, I guess when I went vegan, more years ago than I care to remember, yeah, I was like you. I didn't know what the word vegan meant, and I met these two guys. This man and this woman who I was playing in a band with, and they said, we're vegan. I'm going, well, what's that? And I sort of really didn't make the connection until a few years later. Then I made the connection, and my whole life changed. But thinking back to where you are now, what's some of the types of different activisms you've done over the years? Because obviously you've been involved in this now for quite a while.
So it's been a real range of different activism. When I was 14 years old, I went to that dolphin park, which I was talking a little bit about before, when I talked about, seeing animals in really bad conditions, like at a zoo and things like that. I went there, and this terrible, terrible dolphin park, treat the animals horribly. They're in tiny swimming pools. And I went there, 14 years old. I snuck in a sign, and I disrupted that show. That's one of my first, kind of animal activism things that I did. And I pulled up this sign, and as the dolphins are, doing their tricks right then, and it's a very small park, and I said, it's not cute, it's cruel. It's not cute, it's cruel. And I yelled it out all the way along that very small pool. I mean, this is a terribly small pool. And then the trainers on there were like, we're so sorry, we're going to have to kick him out soon. We're so sorry for this. And then all these trainers, I've never seen trainers so angry before. They were furious. Usually, you think trainers, they're like bright, smiled, they've got the dolphins with them and they're so happy to show people. They were like, angry, very, very angry and furious. But the reason why I did that protest is because it's obviously extremely cruel, but I also knew it symbolized a much bigger movement coming ahead. And yeah, ever since that, I've been doing just a whole heap of different protests and advocacies, and I've been protesting outside that park for many years as well. But yeah, I protest for all different issues, and the greyhounds too, always at the $1 Million Chase protests. That's at Wentworth Park in Glebe. To rally up people there and to make people aware that the greyhound racing is still happening in New South Wales. I've also done protests outside, or bear witnessing outside slaughterhouses. So I've, when I was maybe 16, one of the first kind of protest things was, seeing the sheep be, taken to the slaughter in Melbourne, and then they coming out just as their skins. And, that's a very confronting thing, and bearing witness of chickens as well in Sydney. And you see the chickens, and before you see the chickens, you can smell the chickens. The trucks are coming because the smell is just so intense and just horrible, and they're just very sick animals. And then you see the chickens come into the slaughterhouse, and then you see the freezers come out, and then on the freezers it says free range, humane, happy, and all these things like that. It's very confronting to see that too as well. But yeah, just a range of different protests and advocacy. In the city, I've done stuff with PETA as well, and I've organised PETA protests. One of the PETA protests, one of my favourite ones actually, although being quite confronting to do myself, was laying, it looked like almost nude, laying in a meat tray. and had fake blood covered on us, and we were wrapped in Glad wrap, and we were just laying there in Pitt Street Mall, and everybody was swarming us, like looking. I heard people saying, "Is this a real person?" They weren't too sure if I was a mannequin or something, and that was all over the news, and that raised a whole heap of awareness too. And some people might think, oh, that's very extreme to do something like that, or something like this might turn people away from being vegan. I actually found with this protest, it actually was really thought-provoking for people. So even if you weren't really thinking too much about animals, I think people did kind of think, imagine if this was us wrapped in a plastic packet. It's not really a nice thing to do to animals. Also have done shark net protests where we've kind of beached ourselves on the beach and wrapped in nets as mermaids. In Manly, we had like fake kittens, and we're having a stall selling kitten meat, and I was trying to give out samples to people, and people were coming up to us horrified, going, "What the? Are you allowed to swear in this or not? Is it?"
Go for it.
Just like what the F, this, you're eating the kittens, how could you do this? And like they were just so like, it was, as soon as we set up the table, we were really worried actually, because people were just curious, because they genuinely thought that they were very realistic looking kittens, and we had ice, they were on ice, there were kittens in the little meat trays on ice with lemons, and I'm like squeezing the lemon onto the kitten. Yeah, and so, but it did make
I'm
people
sorry.
think.
I've got to cut in there. That is just amazing. Like, I'm getting all these mental images. Oh man, how brilliant is that? That
really
is so
thought-provoking.
Cool. Yeah.
I love those thought-provoking things. And then at the Dolphin Park, we have a circus tent put up, and then we've got a little tiny kiddie pool, and I'll dress as in a dolphin costume, and I'll be in that little tiny pool holding up a sign about stop circus tricks, stop captivity. And the news has come up to me and, filmed that and said, wow, this is really thought-provoking. This is really good. This is making people think. So, yeah, I do like those thought-provoking things. Is always something that I like to do. And it is a lot of fun to do, as long as nobody's getting too crazy at you with these type of things. But generally, it's positive what's going on with the public's reaction to things. People are curious about what's going on with animals, and I think, and I guess that kind of bit of being entertained too with it as well. It can, and the comedical type of element of things too, that can kind of entice people in, and then have them have a serious conversation and reflect on what's happening to animals. So yeah, I do find those type of things to be quite good too. But again, it's a different things in different spaces. Obviously, if I'm running for like the election and stuff like that, I'm talking about specific law changes and things like that. But if I'm just generally trying to bring awareness to what's happening to animals and these other things, can be good too.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you've certainly done such a huge array of activism. Have you faced many challenges as a young activist? And if so, how have you overcome them?
So I certainly have faced many challenges being an activist in terms of the bullying that comes with it through people from the industry, and threats and death threats, impersonations as well. Like quite serious things to have to deal with as a young person that, when it's happening, it's just so shocking and unexpected. You don't think people could be so... I know that they're cruel to animals, but you don't think that they could stoop as low as what they do. And so, when I was just a kid, my identity was stolen. So they took my photos, they took my name, they pretended to be me on social media and to the news. And they actually released the address of somebody and created this barbecue outside a vegan's home, and it got like 200,000 RSVPs. It was all in my name, and SBS quoted me, but that wasn't me. So they were quoting this impersonator, and there was just thousands and thousands of articles that were impersonating me. And this Facebook page was posting ISIS beheadings and saying that this is what I want to happen to people. This type of really extreme things to do. And the reason that this was happening is to bully me into silence, to make me go away, because they're obviously very threatened by what I stand for. But yeah, that was all very shocking. And I guess it was also just a reality check in some ways, in terms of the media isn't only just lying about what's happening to animals, they can actually completely lie about a kid who's just trying to make a difference, and they never ever apologize to me. Why would SBS not apologize? It was on Sunrise as well with Koshi. Why has there never been an apology for things like that? I mean, that's pretty awful. But at the same time, although this is very stressful and I had to take time off school because of this, I was at school just looking at all these articles with my name on them, and it was all just it was not true. Nothing, it was just somebody impersonating me. It actually does make me more resilient, and it also makes me realize that I obviously am making a difference, because they're that scared of me that they're taking the time to cause all these type of problems. So when they do this type of stuff, I just go even harder for the animals, that they cannot stop me. But that's just one part of the type of intimidation tactics. Of course, there's been death threats too, people wanting to say that they want to shoot me and kill me. I mean, I was protesting recently in Coffs Harbour, and before that protest, there was things online about throwing rocks at me, and luckily these are AJP protests now happening in Coffs Harbour, where that dolphin park is, where the poor dolphins are. And so the AJP is a lot more resourced to kind of help with these type of things. But it has been discussed about things about obviously having to talk to the police more. Is there a security measure that we need to have? Do we need to hire security because it's that dangerous to protest in Coffs Harbour? I mean, I've had, at these protests, activists have been properly assaulted. We've had phones broken, we've had things, had property damage, signs thrown about, the demo stuff thrown about, and people have actually got permanent scars from protesting in Coffs Harbour and have been assaulted. So yeah, it is, that type of stuff is not good. But this particular dolphin park is very scared that we're telling the truth. So they're going in very extreme measures to try and intimidate us.
Well, that brings us to the next question. But before I ask the next question, holy guacamole, dude. You're an inspiration, and what you've been going through, most activists would walk away.
Yeah.
I congratulate you. I admire you for everything that you're doing. So you are really quite amazing. So just stay strong, because the whole activism scene needs more people like you. So congratulations on being awesome.
Thank you very much.
So we'll take you into the next question, because you've actually just brought us into that question. You're recently becoming more focused on the marine side of things. And of course, you've mentioned Coffs Harbour. Please fill us in with more about that.
So there is a facility in Coffs Harbour, New South Wales. This facility has recently changed their name to Coffs Coast Wildlife Sanctuary. So they've changed their name many times, but this is the most misleading name change that they have done. This facility is not a real sanctuary. There are 3 dolphins in tiny chlorinated swimming pools. These dolphins are not rescued dolphins. All 3 have been purposely bred into these tiny pools for entertainment. They are not rescued dolphins. These animals, including seals, are forced to perform demeaning circus-style tricks. It's actually the only facility in Australia that has sea lions painting. I'm talking about sea lions with paintbrushes in their mouth, and there's canvases, and they're painting. This facility calls themselves a sanctuary. They claim that the animals are not doing tricks or doing shows, and they claim natural behaviours. They just lie to the public. We hold up signs that say there are 0 rescued dolphins here, because people are being misled by this facility. The facility just outright lies to people, and we turn a lot of people away by having the sign, there are 0 rescued dolphins here, because unfortunately this park is very misleading, and people think that, a sanctuary, and they talk a lot about rescuing, and they outright lie too, that these dolphins are rescued. Then that obviously us holding a 0 rescue dolphin sign does bring a lot of attention, and it does turn a lot of people away, because this facility, those 3 dolphins are not rescued dolphins, and the facility is definitely misleading people about what's actually happening in there. The dolphins are used in really cruel interactive experiences, and so this is where dolphins are literally being used for rides and things like that. Yeah, it's just really cruel. And the facility show pool is actually 20% smaller than the legal standards. So the facility is only operating with a variation to its license. So yeah, there's a big welfare issues there. There's also been a baby dolphin that has died. The baby dolphin ate litter and metal from the pool, and a trainer, not a veterinarian, shoved his hand down the dolphin's throat to pull out the litter, and the baby suffered a heart attack. The facility doesn't have an on-site dolphin vet. So it's really just, these are tiny chlorinated pools with animals being used and abused for entertainment, and they're pretending it's a sanctuary. The original name of the facility was actually Pet Porpoise Pool. And so obviously a rename change to sanctuary is a lot more appealing than Pet Porpoise Pool or Dolphin Marine Magic, and all these different range of names that they've used for this park. But yeah, it's definitely a big campaign that's happening there in Coffs Harbour. There's an Animal Justice Party working group on this as well, and we're doing protests in the school holidays about it too. And yeah, there's a lot more planned about it, because there's major animal welfare issues here. And the fact that they've got 3 dolphins too there. Dolphins are very social animals. They're very emotional animals. What's happening with these dolphins when the next one dies and then the next one dies? Is there really going to be a lone dolphin in this tiny pool in Coffs Harbour? These are the type of questions that we're asking. What is the future for these animals here?
So, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that people have about animals, I guess specifically marine animals in captivity? I guess the obvious one is sea lions don't actually naturally paint.
I can't believe that they're doing that, and they're saying they're doing natural things. I'm yet to see a sea lion in the wild with a paintbrush in its mouth.
Absolutely. So, basically the notion that these animals are performing natural behaviours, we spell it out to people. No, painting, that's not a natural behaviour for sea lions. They've got the dolphins spinning hula hoops on their nostrums. Again, that's not a natural behaviour. It gets more extreme with some of their TikTok videos. There's even a TikTok video, and they instruct the sea lion to push over one of the trainers, and the trainer is twerking on the sea lion, and it's very sexualized type of video. So it's not natural behaviors. This is not education. I've spoken to the owner of the dolphin park. It's always very interesting when she comes over and asks, what would you like us to do? I said, well, step 1, don't have circus style tricks. And then she's telling us these are natural behaviors. I said, they're not Picasso. They're not saying a little bit of yellow today. She got red in the face with that. But I'm asking her, I'm like, you can't say these are natural behaviors and then have this happening. So that would be, a misconception is that these are natural behaviors, that these animals are behaving naturally. Another misconception about captivity would be, of course, that the notion that these are rescued dolphins. No, most dolphins in captivity have been purposely bred into captivity. And there are, of course, captured dolphins around the world. And then there are so-called rescued dolphins. But is it really a rescue to bring dolphins into captivity and then to use those dolphins for breeding, and then to continue this cruel cycle of a baby dolphin dying and then replace that baby dolphin with another? That's not rescuing either. So, yeah, those type of notions are very big. We're really drumming in at the moment that this is not education. The facility is making out that they're about education. That's not true. They also have night events as well, and people are holding their beers, having their champagne alongside wildlife. That's really cruel. I mean, again, it's even these very basic, simple things that they could fix and do that they just flat out refuse to change. I mean, when you go to a public pool, you're not allowed to have glass there. So why are you allowed to have glass beers and champagne next to the dolphins? I mean, that's very recent photos of that happening there, and they say they can fit 200 people for stand-up cocktail. I mean, this is a very small park, and it's very clear that they're using them for entertainment. And yeah, there's been a lot of issues, even just since they've changed their name to Sanctuary.
Look, I remember seeing, unfortunately, before I really realised what was going on with things like dolphins, seeing in SeaWorld that they would have the trainers riding on the backs of the dolphins. Like, where in the wild are humans riding on the backs of dolphins? These are not natural behaviours. So, this is brilliant.
Absolutely.
Absolutely brilliant at calling this out. Now, you've mentioned that you have been doing a lot of work with Animal Justice Party, but have you had collaborations with any other organisations or any other activists?
Yeah, so I will work alongside many different groups. Currently, in terms of there's so many different groups, but like the most recent, I would say, would be like the Coalition for the Protection of Greyhounds. So we've recently done a protest at New South Wales Parliament House, and we've been doing collaboration posts on social media. So that means, I will be filming these protests, and then it will go onto their social media page. And so that is really helpful to just bolster those efforts, especially with the victory in New Zealand for greyhound racing to be banned. We've been doing a lot of collaboration posts of that, and those have got viral at the moment, 80,000 views, which is good. And our caption is Australia next. There are other animal welfare groups in terms of with dolphins as well. Of course, there's World Animal Protection too, and I've been telling them as well about what's happening in Coffs Harbour too. And so I've just been reaching out in terms of the issue of dolphins in captivity, been reaching out to all different groups. But I've really found that the Animal Justice Party has just been such an amazing, to work with. And I feel like they are the most influential and powerful when it comes to things. And yeah, I'm pretty excited with the AJP.
Yeah, amazing. You have touched on some of the backlash that you received from the owner of this, marine dolphin sanctuary. But have you received any other backlash more broadly from the marine park industry?
Oh, yeah, certainly their facade comes down. They can be quite intimidating. They can make up things. The bullying that they can do is pretty awful. And it's not just towards me, it's towards others as well. One of my close friends is Taylor McEwen, and she is an Olympic swimmer, and she's also experienced a bullying, intimidation, and people were trying to get her kicked off the Dolphin swim team because she's speaking out against dolphin captivity. So certainly they are increasingly worried about our influence and that we're speaking up for these animals. So they do these bullying behaviours. I would say the worst, there's been so many terrible things that these dolphin trainers do, but I would say one of the craziest things was when there was legislation looming about a ban to dolphin captivity in New South Wales, and this is going to sound really shocking, but the day before basically, a lot more of the talk on dolphin captivity and legislation and protests and things like that. The dolphin parks windows and the entrance was smashed and graffitied and had all this, type of animal rights sounding slogans on it. And we've been told from an insider within the park that it was them who did this. And they allegedly smashed in their own windows and graffitied the park to promote violence towards us and to derail legislation. And so I think I was a young, maybe 15 or something, I was accused publicly on social media of smashing in the windows of the dolphin park and graffitiing the dolphin park. And that's just not true. There's CCTV footage of that incident, and clearly it's not some small 14 or 15-year-old doing this in the early hours of the morning. So things like that is pretty crazy. And that's just shocking. This could be like, everybody knows about Tiger King and the craziness of that. I feel like Coffs Harbour and the dolphin movement could have their own type of Dolphin King type of show. Because it is pretty crazy. It is crazy because we all know that this facility is on its last legs. They've been in voluntary administration before. So they're worried a lot.
Yeah.
So
Could you just educate us, how many captive dolphins are there in Australia? I know of SeaWorld on the Gold Coast, and the only other one I know of is the one in Coffs Harbour. Are there more?
So there's only 2 facilities left in Australia with captive dolphins. So there's the Coffs Coast Wildlife Sanctuary in Coffs Harbour, and then there's SeaWorld on the Gold Coast. And there are around 30 dolphins in captivity in Australia. And so SeaWorld, is one of the largest venues holding dolphins in captivity in the world. Luckily, in New South Wales, the Animal Justice Party has got a really important breeding ban. So the Coffs Harbour facility can never breed or import any more captive dolphins. So that's a very important step to really wind down what's happening in New South Wales and the captivity of these animals. But of course, there's much more to do with those 3 still remaining there. They should be retired. They shouldn't be in shows and things like that. But in Queensland, they can get more dolphins. So they're breeding them and they're so-called rescuing dolphins too. But most of the dolphins there at SeaWorld on the Gold Coast are being purposely bred into captivity. There are dolphins there that are beside noisy rides as well. And, dolphins are very sensitive animals, and, things can also be flung, off rides as well and into their pools. So there's issues with having rides in close proximity to wild animals, as well as they've got night events with fireworks there on the Gold Coast too. They also have got polar bears. But with the polar bears, I would be very surprised if they were to get more polar bears there at SeaWorld. Reason being is that so many have died there, and it's just it's really uncomfortable for people to see those polar bears on the Gold Coast. It makes people who don't really think about animals in captivity, makes them feel uncomfortable. So I couldn't imagine them getting any more polar bears. I hope that they don't.
I've actually seen the polar bears there, and they just do repetitive stress actions like diving into the water, coming up to the window, pushing off the water, and then just continually going around. And people are going, wow, 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 look at this, isn't it amazing? But I keep trying to explain to people it's not amazing. These animals are stressed. They're not in a real, true environment. We're in a hot climate, and sure, they have them, depends, iced up a little bit, but they still are in a hot climate. So this is just so unnatural to have any sort of animal in this sort of captivity.
Certainly,
Are there any regions or other countries that have made significant progress in stopping animals in captivity? And what can we learn from them?
So Canada, they banned the breeding and import of dolphins and whales in captivity. And so the Animal Justice Party really were looking at this legislation and going, hey, let's do the same in New South Wales. And then that's what we did. That's important. France has also ended dolphin and whale captivity too. So yeah, there's a lot of countries that are ending this practice, which is really important, and we should be looking at what they're doing and then copy the same here. With the 3 dolphins in Coffs Harbour, of course, there can be no more purposely bred into captivity, which is important. However, the laws definitely need to be strengthened to stop the use of those animals for entertainment, because yes, those 3 dolphins, have been born into captivity now, but that doesn't mean that they should have a lifetime where they're performing circus tricks, where they're being forced to give rides to tourists and things like that. So we would like to really not just have the legislation to ban breeding, but like have another step, another step, another step. So it's always a continuous steps with this. And one of the most important things too is in Coffs Harbour, those 3 dolphins, so their names are Bella, Zippy, and Jet. And it's really making people to connect with those dolphins and with their stories can really help give them a voice and to help bring about much needed changes. And like with the polar bears at SeaWorld, when there's just a couple of animals, people do take more notice. Whereas at SeaWorld on the Gold Coast, there's around 30 dolphins, and they don't even tell you how many dolphins that are there. Like you ask a trainer there at SeaWorld, they're like, "Oh, we've got around 30." It's not very personable. Whereas if you've got a handful of dolphins, like in Coffs Harbour, and you've got a handful of polar bears on the Gold Coast, those are looking increasingly like the very last. And so they're a lot more personable. And if they die, the public is well aware of that happening.
That's very true.
I still find it hard to believe, though, at the SeaWorld at the Gold Coast, because they have marine exhibitions. They've got a huge aquarium, but then right in the middle of the park, they have a fish and seafood restaurant. So they go there, they see these animals, and then they go and eat them. I just find that just so mind-boggling.
Yeah, so much disconnect.
Yeah.
Yes, that is true. That is very hypocritical, and it's it's very hypocritical for SeaWorld to be SeaWorld and other aquariums to be claiming to care about animals and to safeguard animals and to be about conservation, while you can literally see marine life and then eat them and then also cause the environmental destruction they're trying to say that they're trying to stop and help animals with. So yeah, it's very hypocritical. We've also had discussions in Coffs Harbour about that too, because they were posting, I think it was a World Oceans Day post, and they were saying, World Oceans Day, what can you do? And then their World Oceans Day post was seafood recipes. And we were like, what is going on here? Like, they've got no idea what they're doing. They've got no idea what they're talking about. A World Oceans Day, Protect the Oceans post should not be seafood recipes. And also the seafood recipes were really bizarre, and they were the most bizarre type of seafood recipes. They were cutting up the fish to look like Nemo, like they were doing the salmon and they were doing the rice, and it looked weird. And then they had a lobster that was presenting a bowl of like a fish dip. It looked really bad.
Well, I've got to say, I work with Kangaroos Alive, and on World Kangaroo Day, of course, it's a pretty huge day. There was a pub in the Rocks that advertised, come and celebrate World Kangaroo Day with us, eating our great kangaroo steaks.
Ugh.
And I'm thinking, what are people thinking?
How does that add up?
Yeah.
It's absolutely hypocrisy. And on the note of kangaroos, this year there is Dreamworld on the Gold Coast. So Dreamworld is another theme park, and they've got captive tigers, and they've got kangaroos, and they've got koalas, and those wildlife experiences. Well, Dreamworld at their afternoon market had a stall there that only sold kangaroo burgers. So people are cuddling up to these kangaroos at Dreamworld, getting their photos with the kangaroos, and then they're eating the kangaroos after they've had the experience. And Dreamworld runs a organization called the Dreamworld Wildlife Foundation. And they're like, we put so much money into wildlife conservation and helping animals. Literally, you're serving kangaroos, and it's a kangaroo meat stall talking about the great benefits of kangaroo meat and this and that. And it's just really bizarre. There's also another facility in Sydney, a zoo, and they have signs there saying, oh, our animals are lucky to be in the zoo because they won't be, leather bags and belts. And then people think about, okay, they're in captivity, but at least they're not bags and belts. But guess what is in the gift shop? Kangaroo skin, the hats, the crocodiles. So
Wow.
in one sentence, they're saying our animals are lucky to be here because they're not bags and belts. But then in the gift shop, you're able to buy kangaroo skin hats. You're able to buy jewelry that's got, shark teeth and crocodile teeth and all this type of stuff. It just does not make any sense. I mean, the Sea Life Aquarium in Sydney, too, when you, then the main food that they sell there is fish and chips, is weird. And on top of that, they tell you not to use plastic straws, but then the poppers have got plastic straws in them. So it's just all lies. It's all made up.
It's all what's convenient when it comes to making money.
Exactly. It's not true. They're not about conservation. They're not about education. But it's an important point that you make there, and it's something that I do want to discuss with. I don't agree with animals being in captivity. However, I would like to work with the zoo bodies to go, hey, if you're being accredited by the Zoo and Aquarium Association, the standard should be not to sell wildlife products. So that's something that I would like to talk with the kangaroo groups, talk about, with these, the leather cruelty groups, try and get that change. Even though we're against zoos, we're against aquariums, we're against the exploitation of animals, if they could change that, again, it's an easy change to make.
Yeah, we've kind of touched on my next question a little bit, talking about these different aspects of public awareness and education. But I guess, what role do you think public awareness has in changing people's attitudes about captive animals and maybe getting more people to boycott the zoo?
Yeah, so I think it's just really important in terms if you want people to boycott like zoos and aquariums, SeaWorld and these type of places, you just need to make it clear to people what some of those myths are and then break those down for them, because people are under the impression that they're about conservation and education and that these are wonderful places for animals. But I would say to people is to just look a bit deeper into what's happening here. Are these animals being bred into captivity and then released back into the wild? Or are they being bred into captivity to stay in captivity forever and being gawked at by tourists? And when it comes to dolphins, too, the dolphins in captivity here in Australia, they're bottlenose dolphins. So they're not endangered and they're being bred. And the only reason they're being bred is to be used for entertainment and to be used in shows. But of course, there are many zoos across Australia, and there can be quite significant welfare issues. I mean, even when you look at Taronga Zoo, has quite a good reputation for their animals, but there's trading between this park in Coffs Harbour and Taronga. So when they're at Taronga Zoo, are the sea lions painting? No. But when they're in Coffs Harbour, they are. And so it's kind of making those connections with things too. There's also the issue of surplus animals being killed. And so Taronga Zoo actually was exposed for sending endangered antelope to a member of the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party for him to use in canned hunting. I mean, these are endangered antelope, endangered animals that they didn't want anymore. They sent away to be used for breeding for people to canned hunt. This is not a place about conservation or education. And, I've always been very upset about the elephants at Taronga Zoo. And there were huge protests. I mean, there were huge protests in Thailand. The Thai people were holding up signs, please do not take our elephants. Don't take our elephants. And Taronga Zoo came in with their bullhooks and said, no, these elephants are ours. We're using them for our conservation, our education, and this is going to be brilliant for the city. So there are definitely significant, and if those type of issues have happened at Taronga Zoo, what's happening with these other smaller parks?
Yeah.
If the best of the best, that's what's happened, then you can see that there is an issue across Australia with captive animals. But when it comes to animals that are highly intelligent, highly social, those are the type of animals that we're going to find more easily to be able to stop the breeding of and import of. So yeah, again, like dolphins and whales and elephants, they're a much easier animal for us to go, do not have those animals in captivity, stop the breeding now of them.
So I was going to ask a more specific question of you right now, but I think we've touched on such a broad area. So for listeners who want to help, and of course we were going to ask more about the marine animal captivity, but of course we've covered so many other different animal welfare issues. So for listeners who want to help, what are some of the steps that you would suggest they can take to move forward?
The biggest step would be to, I would say, if they are unaware of some of the issues around dolphins and whales into captivity, watch documentaries such as Blackfish. So Blackfish is currently on Netflix. That's a brilliant documentary that talks about some of those myths. And it's about this whale in captivity that was involved in the deaths of 3 people. It talks about how these marine parks lie and cover up cruelty, and that this is a very brutal and cruel trade. There's also another documentary called The Cove, and that documentary will really show you what these dolphin trainers are like, because a lot of people are under the impression that these dolphin trainers really care about the animals and they love them and there's this and that. But actually, there's a lot of really evil dolphin trainers, including here in Australia. There are dolphin trainers that have trained dolphins here in Coffs Harbour that have previously trained freshly captured dolphins caught in Taiji, Japan. So these are dolphins that have been herded into a cove that runs red with their blood. The pretty ones, the flipper type of dolphins, are taken for aquariums and trained, and the rest are brutally slaughtered. These are really evil people who are actually training some of our dolphins here in Australia, and they'll put on their shirt, conservation and all that, but look what they're doing overseas. I mean, that really shows what type of people that they are. So I think watching those documentaries to have a better understanding that these people don't just have a different idea to us, they're circusy type of people. They want to use these animals for shows, and they just use education and conservation to try and manipulate and mislead people. I've got a social media account at Warrior for Animals on Instagram, and you can learn a lot more about captivity and the events coming up. And then excitingly, there is a Animal Justice Party Stop the Circus workshop too. And that is something that a lot of people might want to join into. And you don't have to have all these skills or anything, just whatever you can do. If you like to write a letter, do that. If you like to comment on a Facebook post to say, hey, this is not a sanctuary. If you've got some idea about something, everybody can do their little bit to help. And there's a petition too, as well, on Animal Justice Party New South Wales. There's a petition called Stop the Circus, and yeah, you can sign that petition and learn more about what's happening in Coffs Harbour too.
Amazing. We will share your social media in the show notes and the link to the petition as well, so people can sign that. Just as a final question, I mean, you're an amazing young activist, and I think a lot of people would look to you for inspiration. So do you have any advice for other young people who might want to get involved in animal rights activism?
My advice for young people who are wanting to get involved in animal rights activism is to basically just do the best that you can do. I think that is the most important thing. So if there's some issue that you're really passionate about, work towards that issue. If you want to branch out into all different issues, that's great too, but just do the best that you can do with this. And also realize that animal rights is a bit of a is a bit of a numbers game. We don't necessarily need to get every single person on board into the animal rights cause, but if we get a certain percentage on there, we can really start getting movement on these issues. There are going to be some people who are very cruel and who don't care about animals, but you don't really need to talk to them. You talk to somebody who's going to be more receptive and is going to care about the issue, and then you get them to join side, and then that's how we can try and get change to happen. So yeah, don't be too worried about not everybody being on side with you. Just do the best that you can do in your conversations and in any sort of activism that you do. And if you experience bullying and things like that, definitely try and stay strong with that. Get help if you need to as well. But the community, should really rally behind you if these type of issues arise, and just hold strongly about what's happening to the animals.
So, Mason, Bailey, I'm just blown away by this whole conversation. Too. This has just completely moved me. How Bailey can they contact you if anyone wants to contact you and have discussions or find out more?
Well, the best way would be through Worry for Animals on Instagram. Just send me a message if you've got any questions about anything or need any help with anything, or if you know about animal cruelty happening, you can just send me a message. And I'm somebody who I do have a lot of media contacts. So if there's an animal cruelty issue, I'm able to get that into the media and to get the story out there. But I'm also somebody who's very collaborative, and I'm happy to help bolster anybody else's efforts, because we all need to help each other in all these different issues. So yeah, whatever anybody needs, just send me a message and I'm happy to help.
Amazing. This has been a conversation that I think everyone will take something from. So thank you so much for your time, Bailey. I'm kind of speechless too, Rick. I knew you were amazing, Bailey, but there's so much more to you that I didn't know, and you're so resilient. And the way that you're so fearless as well and put the animals first in everything you do is very inspiring.
And can I just say, from an activist who may be a few years older than you, well, actually quite a lot of years older than you, to look down and see that there is the likes of you and, of course, Mackenzie beside me coming through the ranks and doing such amazing work. It just blows me away, and I feel like that the movement is just going to keep getting stronger with the likes of both of you. I take my hat off to you. You seriously, dude, are one amazing dude.
Thank you very much. I think as well, I hold very closely, even just the small little victories. I know that, this little victory can be another little victory and then another. And it's just a step-by-step gradual process to get change. And although it's very hard, for things to be so slow, in changing, at least every little bit of victory is going to come to a much better outcome for animals.
Definitely.
Well, thank you so much, Bailey, for being with us. I'm lost for words like you. It's just been one of the most remarkable episodes we've recorded so far, and I'm really hoping that we can reach out for people to see exactly what you're doing. So that brings us to the end of another episode.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us.
And thank you, Bailey.
Thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So, folks, that does bring us to the end. We will see you in our next podcast. So goodbye from us.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Vegan Compass podcast, unveiling truths, inspiring change.
Be sure to follow us on social media at @thevegancompass_podcast. See you next time.